They called Nyla Grant a fat woman. They said her body was the reason no baby survived. Then one night, her husband stood in the doorway with another woman and said, "She's pregnant." His mother dragged Nyla's suitcase outside and screamed, "Get out! My son needs a real woman!" But as Nyla stood there shaking, one hand moved slowly to her stomach, because the woman they were throwing away was hiding a secret that would change all their lives. Nyla Grant was the kind of woman who loved quietly, not with loud speeches, not with public drama. She loved with patience. She loved with loyalty. She loved with sacrifice. She was 27, plus-sized, soft-spoken, the type who apologized even when she was the one hurting, and her husband, Terence Grant, was the type who smiled in public and turned cold in private. He was 30, clean-cut, proud, raised to believe a man must always be right, even when he was wrong. People in their neighborhood used to call them goals, 2 black lovebirds, a new apartment, matching Sunday outfits, big dreams, but stay till the end, because the same house that took Nyla in with smiles would soon push her out with cruelty. That morning, the sun was bright, too bright for the heaviness Nyla carried in her chest. She stood in the small kitchen, stirring grits slowly, because moving fast made her nauseous. Terence sat at the table, scrolling on his phone, tapping like nothing in the world could touch him. Nyla watched him for a second, then she cleared her throat softly. "Terence, can we talk today?" Terence didn't look up. "Talk about what?" Nyla swallowed. "About us, about the baby we lost." Now he looked up, and his eyes were already tired of her. "Nyla, we talked already. It happened. Move on." Move on. That was his favorite sentence. Move on from pain, move on from grief, move on from accountability. Nyla forced a nod, even though her throat was tight. She placed a plate in front of him like a peace offering. Then Terence stood up, grabbed his keys, and said what he always said on Sunday mornings. "We going to my mum's?" Nyla's stomach twisted harder than the nausea, because Terence's mother was not just a mother-in-law, she was a judge. Her name was Yvonne Grant, a sharp-tongued churchwoman who ran her family like a courtroom. And once Yvonne decided you were guilty, she never needed evidence. Terence drove fast, one hand on the wheel, the other still holding his phone. Nyla sat quietly, looking out the window, telling herself one lie again and again. Maybe today will be peaceful. Maybe today they'll be kind. Maybe today they'll stop blaming me. But the minute they stepped into Yvonne's living room, the air shifted. "Lord have mercy," Yvonne said, staring at Nyla's body like it offended her. "Terence, you sure you okay?" Nyla's face warmed. Terence laughed like it was a joke, like it wasn't poison. Then another voice joined in, loud and careless. "Still no baby yet?" That was Darnell Grant, Terence's older brother, a grown man who loved to bully people and call it truth. Nyla's fingers tightened around her purse strap. Yvonne clapped her hands like she was about to announce church announcements. "Everybody keep praying," she said, "because some women don't know how to be women." Nyla's mouth went dry. Terence sat down on the couch and turned on the TV. Like none of this mattered, like Nyla was not sitting there shrinking in real time. Nyla tried to speak, but her voice came out small. "I'm trying, I really am." Yvonne turned to her slowly. "Trying," she repeated. "Trying is not enough. My son needs a child." Darnell chuckled. "Maybe she eating too much to make room." The room laughed, not everyone, but enough. Nyla blinked fast. She didn't want tears, she didn't want tears, but tears don't ask permission. She looked at Terence, just once. She begged with her eyes. Terence didn't defend her. He didn't correct them. He didn't even look uncomfortable. He just said, calm and careless, "Nyla, don't start crying. You always make things dramatic." And in that moment, Nyla realized something painful. The problem wasn't only Yvonne, The problem wasn't only Darnell. The problem was the man sitting right beside her, watching her get broken, and calling it normal. 3 weeks after that Sunday dinner, Nyla learned a hard truth. Cruel words don't disappear. They plant seeds, and when pain comes, those seeds grow fast. That morning, Nyla stood in the bathroom with the door locked. She stared at the tissue in her hand, and her whole body went cold. Blood. Not a little. Not, maybe it's nothing. It was enough to make her knees weak. No, not again, like it had been waiting for her. She rushed out and found Terence in the living room, adjusting his watch like he had somewhere important to be. "Terence," she said, voice shaking, "something is wrong." He frowned like she was interrupting him on purpose. "What now?" Nyla grabbed his hand and pressed it against her belly. "I'm bleeding." Terence pulled his hand back like the words disgusted him. Then he sighed, deep and annoyed. "So what you want me to do?" he asked. Nyla blinked, because that wasn't a husband's first sentence. That was a stranger's sentence. I need to go to the hospital," she whispered. Terence rolled his eyes, grabbed his car keys, and said, "Come on then." At the hospital, the waiting room smelled like disinfectant and fear. A nurse called Nyla's name. Terence stayed on his phone. When the doctor finally came out, he didn't drag it out. He didn't soften it. "I'm sorry," he said. "You've had a miscarriage." Nyla's ears rang. She couldn't breathe right. Her hands shook so hard the chair trembled. Terence stood up slowly and just stared at the doctor. Then he asked one question. "So, when can we try again?" The doctor looked uncomfortable, but Nyla looked destroyed. On the drive home, Nyla cried quietly. Terence drove with one hand and turned the radio up with the other. "Stop that," he said. "Crying won't fix it." When they reached home, Terence didn't hold her. He didn't pray with her. He didn't even ask if she wanted water. Instead, he made one call. "Mama," he said into the phone. "Yeah, it happened." Nyla sat on the edge of the couch, listening like someone listening to their own funeral. Then Terence put the phone on speaker. Yvonne's voice blasted through the room, sharp like a slap. "I knew it!" she shouted. "I told y'all! That woman is cursed!" Nyla's heart dropped. Terence didn't correct her. He didn't defend Nyla. He just said, "I don't know what's wrong with her, Mama." As if Nyla was a broken appliance. That evening, Terence's cousin showed up. Her name was Keisha Grant, and she loved gossip the way some people loved oxygen. Always smiling, always pretending to help, always spreading poison. She walked into Nyla's house like she owned it and sighed dramatically. "Oh, Nyla," Keisha said. "I heard. That's so sad." Nyla nodded, eyes puffy. Keisha leaned closer and dropped her real message like a needle. "But you know, people been saying it's because of your weight. Like, your body can't hold nothing." Nyla's face tightened. "Why would you say that?" Nyla whispered. Keisha shrugged. "I'm just telling you what folks saying." And just like that, the rumor took shape, not as a possibility, as a conclusion. The next Sunday, Terence still dragged Nyla to church, not for comfort, for performance. After service, women surrounded Nyla, but not with hugs, with judgment. One older lady shook her head. "Baby, you need deliverance." Another whispered, "Maybe you married with a blocked womb." Nyla stood there, embarrassed, grieving and dizzy. She looked at Terence again, begging with her eyes again. Terence's response was cold. "Don't embarrass me," he muttered. "Just smile, move on." Move on. That word again. And Nyla realized something that made her stomach sink. The loss hurt, but the loneliness hurt more, because she wasn't grieving with a husband. She was grieving beside a man who had already decided she was the problem. 2 months after the first loss, Nyla did something she never thought she would do. She stopped telling people her good news, because in that house, pregnancy wasn't celebrated. It was inspected. It was judged. It was treated like a test. Nyla kept failing. That morning, Nyla stood in the kitchen staring at the pregnancy test. 2 lines. Positive. Her hands shook. Her eyes filled. She wanted to laugh. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run to Terence and say, "It's happening again." But fear held her mouth shut, so she folded the test into tissue, threw it deep into the trash, and whispered to herself, "Please, God, just let this one stay." She finally told Terence later that night, softly, like she was delivering bad news. "I'm pregnant again." Terence paused. Then he nodded once, like she told him the electric bill was due. "Okay," he said, "don't mess it up." Those 4 words sank into her chest like stones. By morning, Yvonne knew. Nyla didn't even ask how. In that family, information traveled faster than kindness. That afternoon, Yvonne showed up at their apartment with 2 grocery bags and a face full of authority. "I brought what you need," she announced. She marched into the kitchen and started unpacking jars, leaves, powders, and bottles that smelled like bitterness and warnings. Nyla stared. "What is that?" Yvonne waved her hand. "Herbs, natural medicine. My pastor's wife uses it. No more losses." Nyla tried to speak gently. "I'm already taking what the doctor gave me." Yvonne's eyes cut through her. "Doctor?" she repeated. "Doctors don't know everything. And you can't be trusted with your own body." Terence walked in, saw the bags, and instead of asking Nyla what she wanted, he nodded at his mother like she was saving the family. "Good," he said. "Do whatever she says, Nyla." And just like that, Nyla lost control of her own pregnancy. From that day, the war began, incident by incident, day by day. First, Terence started monitoring her meals. "If you eat that, you'll lose the baby," he'd say. If she drank juice, he frowned. If she ate rice, he complained. If she craved something sweet, he acted like she committed a crime. Then Yvonne added rules. No salt, no bread, no big plates. Nyla would be hungry and shaking, and Yvonne would smile like hunger was discipline. "Sacrifice is what mothers do," Yvonne said. But the craziest part, Terence started tracking Nyla like she was a child. One evening, Nyla stepped outside to breathe. Just 5 minutes. When she returned, Terence was standing by the door, holding his phone. "Where were you?" he asked. "Outside," Nyla answered. "I needed air." Terence showed his screen, a location app. "You turned off your location for 3 minutes," he said slowly. "Why?" Nyla's mouth opened, then closed again. "Because what do you even say when your husband treats you like a suspect?" Days passed. Nyla grew more tired, more anxious, more quiet. Then one night, the cramps started. Nyla woke up sweating, clutching her stomach, whispering, "No, no, no!" Terence groaned like she woke him for no reason. "What now?" he snapped. "I'm hurting," she begged. "Please, I need the hospital." At the hospital, the nurse at the desk, Nurse Patrice Holden, a firm woman with kind eyes, took one look at Nyla and rushed her back. But kindness couldn't change what was already happening. The doctor's face said it before his mouth did. "I'm sorry," he said. "You've miscarried again." Nyla broke, not loudly, not with screaming, just a silent collapse, like her spirit slid off a cliff. Terence's reaction was quick, too quick. He didn't hold her. He didn't ask if she was okay. He muttered, "Unbelievable." When they got home, Yvonne arrived like she'd been waiting by the window. "What did you do?" she demanded. Nyla's lips trembled. "I didn't do anything." Darnell's voice came through the doorway, full of contempt. Told you, he said. She eating wrong. She too big for a baby to sit in. Terence stared at Nyla like she disappointed him on purpose. Then he delivered the threat that changed everything. I'm not doing this forever, he said. If you can't give me a child, I'll find somebody who can. Nyla's heart slammed, because now she finally understood the truth. This wasn't grief anymore. This was pressure. This was control. This was a marriage turning into a punishment. And deep inside, a quiet thought started forming, sharp and dangerous. What if the problem isn't me? 3 months after the second loss, Nyla stopped expecting comfort from Terence. She stopped expecting kindness from Yvonne. She stopped expecting anything good from that family. But one thing she could not stop was hope. Hope is stubborn like that. So when Nyla's body started changing again, she didn't tell anyone. Not Terence, not Yvonne, not even Keisha. She just sat on the edge of the bed one night, staring at another test with 2 clear lines, and whispering the same prayer like a broken record. Please, just let this one stay. This time, Nyla moved differently. She took prenatal vitamins quietly. She drank more water. She rested when Terence wasn't watching. And she started hiding small baby items like secret treasure. A tiny pair of socks, a neutral-colored onesie, a soft blanket folded neatly at the bottom of her drawer. She didn't buy much. She was too scared to invite disappointment. But she couldn't help it, because even after pain, a mother still dreams. But Terence noticed her silence, and instead of softening, he grew colder. He started coming home later, not traffic late, not work ran long, late like someone didn't want to come home, and when he did come home, he kept his phone angled away from her. He laughed at texts and didn't share the joke. He changed his password. One night, Nyla tried to reach for his hand in bed. Terence pulled away. I'm tired, he said, but his phone lit up again. A message, a heart emoji. Nyla saw it. Terence saw her see it, and he didn't even care. What? He snapped. You about to start again? Nyla's voice shook. I just want us to be okay. Terence sat up and looked at her like she was desperate and annoying. Maybe if you could give me a child, we'd be okay, he said. Those words hit Nyla harder than any slap. Then Yvonne struck again, this time with humiliation wrapped in help. The following Sunday, Yvonne announced she had invited someone special. When Nyla walked into the living room, she saw a man sitting in the corner, wearing a long robe and shiny shoes, holding a bottle of oil like it was a weapon. Yvonne cleared her throat proudly. This is Prophet Lionel Briggs, she said. He's known for breaking curses. Prophet Briggs smiled like he already knew Nyla was guilty. Nyla's stomach dropped. Terence didn't stop it. He didn't question it. He just sat down like this was normal. Yvonne pointed at Nyla. Tell him what's wrong, she demanded. Nyla's voice came out small. I've had losses. Prophet Briggs stood up slowly and walked around Nyla like she was a problem to be diagnosed in public. He hummed. I see heaviness. I see blockage. I see spiritual chains. Nyla's eyes filled, because none of this was private. None of this was love. Prophet Briggs raised his voice. This womb needs deliverance. This woman must fast. This woman must confess. Yvonne clapped. Keisha nodded dramatically like she was watching a show. Nyla looked at Terence again, begging again. Terence's face stayed blank. Then, 2 nights later, the cramps returned. Nyla woke up gasping, hand on her belly, whispering, No, please, not this. She ran to the bathroom, and when she looked down, she knew. Blood again. She cried so quietly, her sobs sounded like choking. Terence banged on the door. Hurry up, he yelled. You always doing too much. When he finally drove her to the hospital, Nyla felt numb, not scared this time, just numb. The doctor didn't take long. I'm sorry, he said. You've miscarried again. That was the third time her body lost something her heart already loved. Nyla didn't scream. She just stared like her soul had left first, and her body was still sitting there waiting to catch up. At home, Yvonne didn't bring soup. She didn't bring comfort. She brought blame. You see, Yvonne snapped. I told you. Your weight is proof. You are the problem. Terence stood by the wall, arms folded, and then he said it, cold and final. I'm tired, Nyla. I can't keep living like this. That night, Nyla opened a notebook for the first time in months. She wrote one sentence at the top of the page. If I stay, I will die inside. And for the first time, she didn't just feel pain. She felt direction. A week after the third loss, Nyla stopped waiting for permission to save herself. She was tired of crying in silence, tired of being blamed, tired of being treated like a failure in her own marriage. So one morning, while Terence was at work and Yvonne was busy running her mouth somewhere else, Nyla put on a simple hoodie, grabbed her purse, and walked out. Not to church, not to Yvonne's house, to a clinic, because Nyla had decided something important. If everybody was so sure she was the problem, then facts would prove it, or facts would expose a lie. At the front desk, the receptionist asked, "First time here?" Nyla nodded. "Fill this out," the woman said, sliding papers across the counter. Nyla's hands trembled as she wrote her name, not because the clinic was scary, because truth was scary. A nurse called her back. Her name was Nurse Camille Reeves, a calm woman with a gentle voice who didn't rush Nyla or look at her with judgment. "Come on, sweetheart," Nurse Reeves said. "We'll take good care of you." Nyla almost cried right there. Inside the exam room, Nyla stared at the wall poster of a smiling baby and felt her chest tighten. She thought about the socks in her drawer, the onesie, the prayers that kept getting answered with silence. Then the doctor entered. Her name was Dr. Alana Whitfield, a black woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes and a steady voice, the kind of doctor who didn't do gossip. She did evidence. Dr. Whitfield sat down with Nyla's file and looked her straight in the face. "Tell me everything," she said, and Nyla did. She talked about the first loss, the second, the third, the blame, the insults, the way her husband watched her suffer, and called it dramatic. Dr. Whitfield didn't interrupt. She just took notes. When Nyla finished, Dr. Whitfield opened the file again and asked questions that shocked Nyla. "Has your husband ever been tested? Has he had a semen analysis? Any history of hormonal imbalance, varicocele, infection, chronic stress, substance use? Any genetic screening done for either of you?" Nyla blinked. "No," she whispered. "He refuses. His mom said men don't get tested." Dr. Whitfield leaned back slightly. "Mm-hmm," she said, "and that's how ignorance keeps families trapped." Nyla's stomach dropped. Dr. Whitfield stood up. "We're going to run your labs and do an exam," she said, "but I need you to hear me clearly." Nyla's palms got sweaty. "Okay," she whispered. Dr. Whitfield looked at her, voice firm but not cruel. "Nyla, you being plus-sized does not automatically cause recurrent miscarriage," she said. "There are many possible causes, but your history, your pattern, it raises a red flag." Nyla swallowed hard. "What red flag?" she asked. Dr. Whitfield paused, then said it slowly so Nyla wouldn't miss it. "A male factor issue could be involved. There are conditions on the male side that can contribute to early pregnancy loss and infertility. Your husband needs evaluation." The room went quiet. Nyla felt like somebody poured cold water down her spine. "So, you're saying—" Nyla's voice cracked. "It might not be me?" Dr. Whitfield didn't soften the truth. I'm saying you have been carrying blame that may not belong to you, she replied. Nyla's eyes filled fast. All those times Yvonne called her cursed, all those laughs at her body, all those nights Terence turned away, and it could have been wrong, it could have been a lie. Dr. Whitfield handed her a tissue. I'm also going to say this, she continued. Stress and emotional abuse can affect the body. You've been under constant pressure, constant shame. That matters. Nyla wiped her tears, shaking. What do I do? She asked. Dr. Whitfield slid a paper toward her. You take this home, she said. It's a referral. You tell your husband you both need testing. This isn't an accusation. It's medical responsibility. Nyla stared at the paper like it was dangerous, because she already knew Terence. She already knew Yvonne. They didn't like truth. They liked control. Still, Nyla left the clinic holding that referral like a secret weapon. Her heart was pounding the whole drive home, not because she was afraid of the results, because she was about to challenge a man who had been hiding behind pride, and a mother-in-law who had been hiding behind blame. And deep down, Nyla knew this next conversation wouldn't be peaceful. It would be war. The following evening, Nyla waited until Terence finished eating. She didn't want to talk while he was hungry, because hungry Terence was worse than tired Terence, and tired Terence was already cruel enough. When he finally pushed his plate away, Nyla took a slow breath and placed the referral paper on the table. Terence looked down at it like it was trash. What's this? He asked. Nyla kept her voice soft. It's from a specialist. The doctor said we should both get tested. Terence's eyes lifted, and the anger came fast, too fast. So you did go behind my back, he snapped. Nyla's heart thumped. I wasn't trying to disrespect you, I just... Terence stood up so hard the chair scraped the floor. You just what? He barked. You trying to say I'm the reason you can't keep a baby? Nyla flinched. I didn't say that, she whispered. The doctor said it could be either of us. We need to know. Terence laughed, not a funny laugh, a bitter laugh. In this family, men are not the problem, he said. You hear me? Men are not the problem. And right on time, the phone rang. Terence glanced at the screen and answered immediately. Hey, Mama. Nyla didn't even need the speaker to hear Yvonne's voice. That woman's voice was loud enough to travel through walls. What's wrong with her now? Yvonne demanded. Terence looked at Nyla while talking to his mother, like Nyla wasn't even human. She went to a clinic, he said, and now she's saying I should get tested. There was a pause. Then Yvonne exploded. Tested? She shouted. Terence, don't let that woman embarrass you. She's trying to shift blame because she knows she's the problem. Nyla's fingers curled into her palm. Yvonne's voice kept coming, sharp and proud. She's big, Terence. Big women have problems. Don't let her bring shame on you. Terence nodded like Yvonne was preaching truth. Then he looked at Nyla and delivered the verdict. We're not doing no tests, he said. End of discussion. And Nyla realized the paper meant nothing in that house. Facts meant nothing. Truth meant nothing. Only pride mattered. 2 weeks passed. Nyla's body started acting different again. Her chest felt tender, her stomach turned at smells, and her period didn't come. Nyla sat on the edge of the bathtub, holding another test with shaking hands. 2 lines. Positive. Again. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out, because it wasn't excitement this time. It was fear. Nyla didn't tell Terence immediately. She kept it quiet, hoping she could get to the clinic first, hoping she could confirm everything before the Grant family turned it into a circus. But Terence had already started changing. He stayed out late, not once, not twice, 3-4 nights a week. And when Nyla asked where he was, he didn't answer with love. He answered with irritation. Stop questioning me, he snapped. You act like my mother. Nyla wanted to laugh, because his mother was the reason he was like this. Then came the night that shattered everything. Terence walked in wearing a new shirt, smelling like expensive cologne, confidence hanging off him like jewelry. Nyla stood in the hallway, heart beating fast. "Where were you?" she asked. Terence didn't even take off his shoes. "I'm done hiding," he said. Nyla's throat tightened. "Hiding what?" Terence stepped aside, and that's when Nyla saw her. A woman walked in like she belonged there. Her name was Sabrina Wells, a slim, flashy woman with loud nails and louder energy, the type who smiled like she was already winning. Sabrina looked Nyla up and down, then smirked. Terence lifted his chin like a man about to announce good news. "Sabrina's pregnant," he said. Nyla felt the room spin. "What?" she whispered. Terence's voice got colder, like he enjoyed her shock. "You heard me. She's pregnant. So clearly, the problem was never me." Nyla's eyes filled instantly, and before she could even speak, Yvonne stormed in behind them, because of course she was there. Of course this was planned. Yvonne clapped her hands like it was a party. "Thank you, Jesus," she screamed. "Finally, a real woman, a woman who can do what you couldn't." Nyla's lips trembled, because they didn't know. They didn't know Nyla was pregnant too. Nyla took a shaky breath, trying to hold herself together. "Terence, please." Terence cut her off. "Pack your things," he said. "I'm not living in a cursed house anymore." And just like that, the man who vowed, for better or worse, chose betrayal, chose humiliation. Yvonne opened the front door wide and pointed at it like a judge passing sentence. "Go!" she snapped. "Go fix yourself somewhere else." Nyla stood frozen, not because she didn't hear them, because she finally understood the real truth. They weren't looking for a solution. They were looking for a scapegoat. And now, with a baby growing inside her that they didn't even know existed, Nyla had to decide something fast. Would she beg for a place in a house that hated her? Or would she protect her miracle and walk away, stay to the end? Because the next person Nyla calls will change everything. That same night, Nyla stood on the porch with one suitcase, one purse, and a pain so heavy she could barely breathe. The front door slammed behind her. Not gently, not with regret, with force, like they were happy to be rid of her. Nyla stared at the suitcase at her feet and felt the world tilt. Her marriage was over. Her dignity had been dragged through the dirt, and inside her body, a secret life was still growing. She placed one trembling hand on her stomach. "Please," she whispered, tears falling hot and fast. "Please stay." For a moment she just stood there under the porch light, too shocked to move. Cars passed, neighbors' curtains shifted, and humiliation sat on her shoulders like a weight she could not shake. Then Nyla did the one thing pride almost stopped her from doing. She called Monique Ellis. Monique was Nyla's childhood best friend, the kind of friend who told the truth, showed up fast, and never needed a long explanation to know when something was wrong. The second Monique answered, she heard it in Nyla's breathing. "Nyla, what happened?" Nyla tried to speak, but the sob came first. Can you come get me?" she whispered. Monique's voice changed immediately. "Send me the address. Don't move. I'm coming." 15 minutes later, Monique's old blue sedan pulled up like rescue itself. Monique jumped out, saw the suitcase, saw Nyla's swollen eyes, and didn't ask useless questions. She just opened her arms. Nyla collapsed into them. "They threw me out!" Nyla cried. "Terence, his mother, he brought another woman." Monique held her tighter. "Enough," she said. "You're not staying one more second on this porch." Monique drove Nyla across town to the one place she knew would be safe, her father's house, Her father was Reverend Curtis Ellis, a respected pastor in his early 60s, known for his deep voice, calm wisdom, and zero tolerance for cruelty hiding behind religion. When he opened the door and saw Nyla in that condition, his face tightened. He stepped aside without hesitation. "Come in, daughter," he said. That one word, daughter, almost broke Nyla all over again. Inside, the house smelled like warm tea and furniture polish. Quiet, clean, safe. Reverend Curtis sat Nyla down at the table and listened while Monique explained everything. He did not interrupt, he did not judge. But when Monique finished, the old pastor's jaw was set. "Throwing out a grieving woman at night," he said slowly. "And calling that righteousness? No, that is cruelty. Plain cruelty." Nyla looked down, ashamed. "I didn't know where else to go," she whispered. Reverend Curtis leaned forward. "Then hear me clearly," he said. "You are not a burden here. You are not cursed, and you are not the names they called you." Nyla's tears started again, but these tears felt different, not humiliation, relief. The next morning, Monique took Nyla to a clinic before sunrise. Nyla needed answers, and Monique was not playing about her health. The nurse checked her vitals. The doctor ran tests. Then the doctor looked at Nyla with careful eyes and said the words that made her chest loosen for the first time in days. "The pregnancy is still there. The baby is okay right now." Nyla covered her mouth and cried, still there, still alive, still holding on. Monique grabbed her hand. "You hear that?" she said, voice shaking. "Your baby is still here." Back at the house, another support arrived. Aunt Denise Walker, Reverend Curtis's younger sister, came over that afternoon carrying food, blankets, and the kind of love that walks in prepared. Aunt Denise was warm, strong, and practical, the kind of woman who could pray for you and fight for you in the same hour. She sat beside Nyla and took her face gently in her hands. "Listen to me," she said. "You will not beg that man. You will not chase that house. You will not go where you are hated." Nyla nodded slowly, because something was changing inside her. Not just fear, not just grief. Resolve. That evening, Monique helped Nyla unpack her small suitcase into the guest room, and as Nyla folded her clothes into a drawer that was finally safe, she made a quiet promise to herself. She would not go back, not to Terence, not to Yvonne, not to that house of blame. This time, Nyla would protect her peace, and this time, she would protect her child. 2 weeks after Nyla left the Grant house, the fake celebration started to rot. At first, Terence acted like he had won. He walked around with his shoulders high, he posted smiling photos. He made sure people saw Sabrina, as if replacing a wife was an achievement, as if humiliation was proof of manhood. One Saturday afternoon, Terence uploaded a picture of himself and Sabrina at a brunch spot downtown. Sabrina was leaning into him, smiling wide, one hand on her stomach like she was already wearing the crown. The caption read, "God finally answered." People liked it. People commented. People assumed the story they were shown was the truth. Yvonne was the loudest of all. "My son is finally happy," she told anyone who would listen. "Some women come to block. Some women come to bless." She said it in beauty salons. She said it after church. She said it on the phone like she was reading scripture. But inside the house, things were already shifting. Because Sabrina was not quiet like Nyla. She was not patient, and she was not going to play the humble daughter-in-law role. The first crack showed up over money. That evening, Sabrina stood in the kitchen, scrolling through a shopping site, while Terence sat on the couch. "I need 800, she said casually. Terence looked up. "For what?" Sabrina didn't blink. "Maternity clothes, hair, a prenatal package. I'm carrying your baby, aren't I?" Terence frowned. 800 for that? Sabrina crossed her arms. So now you're cheap. Yvonne, who was sitting nearby shelling peas like she lived for other people's business, jumped in fast. Terence, give her what she needs, she said. This one is carrying your future. Sabrina smirked because she had already learned the easiest way to control that house. Use the baby. And from that day, every little thing became a demand. A new phone, a salon appointment, a ride across town, cash for cravings, money for stress. Terence started feeling it, not just in his wallet, in his pride. Still, he kept bragging online, kept posting, kept acting like Nyla was the loser, but not everyone was celebrating. Keisha was watching. Keisha, the same cousin who loved gossip more than oxygen, had started getting irritated. At first, it was jealousy. Sabrina was getting attention. Sabrina was becoming the new center of the family drama, and Keisha hated not being the one with the best dirt, so she started paying attention. One afternoon, while Sabrina was in the bathroom, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Again and again. Keisha glanced at the screen. One name kept flashing. Rico Lane. Not once, not twice. 3 missed calls. Keisha's eyes narrowed. "Who's Rico?" she asked when Sabrina came back. Sabrina snatched the phone too quickly. "My cousin," she said, but her tone was sharp, defensive, wrong. Keisha smiled slowly, not because she believed her, because she didn't. That same week, another crack appeared. Yvonne was in the living room telling churchwomen how far along Sabrina was when Sabrina made a careless mistake. "I've been dealing with this morning sickness for almost 4 months now," Sabrina said, rubbing her stomach. The room got quiet. Terence turned his head. "4 months?" he asked. Sabrina froze for half a second, then forced a laugh. "I mean, it just feels like 4 months." But the damage was done, because Terence had only been seeing Sabrina for a little over 2 months. Yvonne blinked hard. Keisha looked from Sabrina to Terence, then back again, and you could almost hear the math entering the room. Later that night, Terence cornered Sabrina in the bedroom. "What did you mean by 4 months?" he asked. Sabrina rolled her eyes. "You're overthinking." Terence stepped closer. "No, you said what you said." Sabrina's voice got louder. "And what if I did? You gonna interrogate a pregnant woman now?" The argument spilled into the hallway. Doors slammed, voices rose. Yvonne came out her room. Keisha stayed close enough to hear every word. And for the first time since Nyla was thrown out, the Grant house no longer sounded victorious. It sounded suspicious. It sounded unstable. It sounded like truth was getting ready to kick the front door open, because the woman they called a blessing was starting to look like a storm, and the same family that rushed to shame Nyla was about to learn what happens when pride celebrates too early. The following week, the Grant house stopped pretending. The smiles were gone. The bragging slowed down, and the same people who had shouted, "God finally answered," were now whispering behind half-closed doors. Because once suspicion enters a house, peace packs its bags. Terence could not let Sabrina's 4 months comment go. He replayed it in his head while brushing his teeth. He replayed it while driving to work. He replayed it at night when Sabrina turned her back and acted offended. 4 months. That number kept haunting him. Finally, one evening, Terence stood in the middle of the living room and said what everyone knew was coming. "We need to settle this." Sabrina looked up from her phone, already irritated. "Settle what?" Terence's voice was tight. "How far along are you really, and who is Rico Lane?" The room went still. Yvonne was in her armchair. Keisha was pretending to scroll on her phone, but her ears were wide open. Even Darnell, who had stopped by uninvited as usual, leaned against the wall like he had front-row tickets. Sabrina laughed, but it came out forced. "Terence, you are doing too much." Terence stepped forward. "No, I'm tired of the lies." Sabrina stood up fast. "Lies? she snapped. "After everything I'm carrying, you calling me a liar?" Yvonne jumped in, trying to protect the fantasy she helped build. "Terence, calm down," she said. "Don't stress that girl. She's pregnant." But Terence was no longer listening to comfort. He was listening to fear. "Answer me," he demanded. "Who is Rico?" Before Sabrina could form another excuse, the front door swung open, and just like that, the mess walked in. Rico Lane was a tall, flashy local DJ with too much confidence and a mouth that loved trouble. He wore designer shades indoors, a gold chain over a plain white tee, and the grin of a man who enjoyed chaos. He looked around the room and smirked. "Oh," he said, "so this where my baby mama been staying?" Silence, heavy silence. Then Yvonne gasped so hard it sounded painful. Terence turned slowly toward Sabrina, his face draining of color. What did he just say? Sabrina's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "It's not what it looks like." Rico laughed loudly. "Then what it look like?" he said. "Because you been dodging my calls for days." Terence lunged forward. "You playing with me?" he shouted. Darnell grabbed him before things got worse. Sabrina started yelling. Rico started yelling louder. Keisha backed into the corner, half shocked, half thrilled. And Yvonne kept shouting one sentence over and over. "Not in my house! Not in my house!" But the truth did not care whose house it was. It was already there. The next morning, Yvonne, desperate, angry, and terrified of public shame, made the decision herself. "We are doing a DNA test," she said, voice trembling. "Today." Sabrina resisted. She cried, she shouted, she accused Terence of abusing her under stress. But this time, the Grant family was no longer protecting her. Because once pride feels threatened, it turns on everybody. Days later, they got the results. The envelope sat on the table like a bomb. Nobody spoke at first. Terence tore it open with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the page once, then twice. Then he stopped breathing right. Keisha whispered, "What does it say?" Terence looked up and his face was shattered. "The baby," he said, voice cracking. "The baby is not mine." And just like that, everything broke. Yvonne screamed, not a small scream, a deep, ugly scream, from a woman who realized she had built a throne for a lie. She grabbed the arm of the couch, clutched her chest, and started breathing hard. "All this time," she cried, "all this time, we disgraced ourselves for this?" Terence threw the paper across the room. Sabrina tried to explain, but no one wanted her words anymore. Rico shrugged like chaos was normal to him. Darnell cursed under his breath. And outside that house, news traveled fast. By evening, neighbors were talking. By night, church members knew. By the next morning, the same community that watched them mock Nyla was whispering about Terence, the man who called himself strong, the man who threw away his wife, the man who celebrated too soon. His reputation cracked in public, his pride bled in private, and for the first time, the shame he once handed to Nyla came home and sat beside him. But stay to the end, because the humiliation of this DNA test was only the beginning. The next blow would not just shake Yvonne, it would drop her to the floor. 3 days after the DNA test, the Grant house looked nothing like the place that once celebrated Sabrina. No music, no loud laughter, no smug speeches from Yvonne. Just silence, heavy silence, the kind that sits in the corners and reminds everybody what happened. Sabrina was gone, Rico was gone, and the lies they left behind were still hanging in the air like smoke. Terence barely slept. He sat awake at night staring at the same wall, replaying every moment. The announcement, the bragging, the way he threw Nyla out, the way he stood there while Yvonne called another woman real. Now all of it was rotting inside him. But Yvonne was taking it even worse. She moved around the house like a woman trying to outrun embarrassment. She snapped at everybody. She cursed Sabrina's name. She cursed Rico's name. And when nobody was around, she even cursed Nyla's name, because some people would rather blame the innocent than face themselves. She brought bad luck into this family, Yvonne muttered one morning, pacing the kitchen. Terence looked up from the table, exhausted. "Ma, stop," he said. "This ain't on Nyla." Yvonne froze, because that was the first time Terence had said anything close to the truth. But before that truth could go any further, karma arrived. It happened that afternoon. Yvonne was in the living room on the phone, loudly telling somebody that the whole situation had been a setup. She was angry. Her voice kept rising. Her breathing got faster. Then suddenly, her words started slurring. The phone slipped from her hand. Her face twisted, and before Terence could reach her, Yvonne collapsed. "Ma!" Terence shouted. He ran to her, panic taking over his whole body. Yvonne tried to speak, but the words came out broken. Her right arm barely moved. One side of her mouth drooped. Terence's chest tightened, because even he knew what it looked like. Stroke. The ambulance came fast, but not fast enough to stop the fear already flooding that house. At the hospital, Terence sat alone in the waiting area, knees bouncing, eyes red, hands trembling. For the first time in a long time, nobody was there to clap for him. Nobody was there to tell him he was right. Just him, his choices and consequences. When the doctor finally came out, his face was serious. "Your mother had a stroke," he said. "She's alive, but recovery may be difficult. She'll need support, ongoing care, therapy, medication." Terence nodded slowly, like each word was another bill landing on his back, and that was only the beginning. Once Yvonne came home, everything changed. Terence became her caretaker, not by choice, by necessity. He had to help her to the bathroom, help her sit up, help her eat when her hands shook too much. The same man who once mocked Nyla's tears was now changing adult diapers and sleeping in broken pieces. And the bills? They piled up fast. Medication, doctor visits, therapy sessions, transport, extra groceries. Every week brought another payment. Terence started opening envelopes with dread. He started checking his account balance like a man staring at bad news. And the family members who used to crowd that house when there was gossip and celebration, they vanished. Darnell came less and less. Keisha stopped checking in. Church people sent one text and disappeared. Because when suffering enters the room, fake support runs for the door. Terence began spiraling. Not in some dramatic, noisy way. In a quiet, ugly way. He started drinking at night. Just a little at first. Then more. Then enough to make mornings feel heavier. One afternoon, while taking Yvonne to a follow-up appointment, Terence finally got his own medical truth shoved in his face. The doctor reviewed old notes, asked questions, and then looked at him carefully. "There are unresolved signs here," the doctor said. "You should have had a fertility workup a long time ago." Terence frowned. "What are you saying?" The doctor didn't sugarcoat it. "I'm saying there may be a male factor issue affecting your ability to father children naturally, and if you ignored it for years, you may have lost valuable time." Terence went still, because now the truth had a white coat on. Now the truth had no cousin's gossip, no church whisper, no maybe. It was real, and it was too late. The same thing Nyla tried to tell him, the same thing he shouted down, had come back with medical proof. And as Terence sat in that parking lot afterward, staring through the windshield with a bottle hidden in the glove compartment, one thought kept pounding in his head. He had destroyed a good woman, for a lie his pride wanted to believe. While Terence's house was drowning in regret, Nyla's life was slowly, quietly changing. Not overnight, not with magic, but with peace, with support, with people who did not treat her pain like a burden. Months had passed since Nyla moved into Reverend Curtis's home, and for the first time in a long time, she was not living on edge every second. Monique checked on her constantly. Aunt Denise made sure she ate well and rested. Reverend Curtis prayed over her, but never in a way that made her feel cursed. And little by little, Nyla's body responded to safety. The pregnancy held. Every checkup felt like a battle won. Every heartbeat on the monitor felt like heaven, whispering, "Keep going." Then one rainy morning, the contractions started. Nyla was in the kitchen holding a mug of tea when the pain hit hard and fast. She gripped the counter. "Aunt Denise," she gasped. Denise turned, saw her face, and moved immediately. "Curtis!" she shouted. "It's time!" The house came alive in seconds. Monique grabbed the hospital bag. Reverend Curtis got the car, and Nyla, sweating and shaking, pressed both hands to her stomach and whispered through tears, "Please, please let her be okay." At the hospital, the hours felt endless. Pain, breathing, nurses moving quickly, Monique holding one hand, Aunt Denise rubbing the other. Then, at last, one final push, and a cry filled the room. A strong cry, a living cry, a miracle cry. Nyla burst into tears the moment she heard it. The nurse laid the baby on her chest, warm and small and perfect. "It's a girl," she said. Nyla looked down at her daughter and sobbed like all the broken pieces inside her had finally met something whole. She named her Imani, because Imani means faith, and faith was what carried Nyla when everything else failed. Back home, life did not become easy, but it became meaningful. Babies need diapers, babies need milk, babies need everything. So when Imani was old enough for Nyla to breathe a little, Nyla went looking for work. That was when she met Charmaine Fulton, the owner of a busy local catering business. Charmaine was a sharp, hard-working woman in her 40s, with a no-nonsense voice and a soft heart she did not show to everybody. Nyla started small, chopping onions, washing dishes, prepping trays. But Charmaine noticed something fast. Nyla had a gift. One afternoon, after tasting a pan of mac and cheese Nyla had seasoned, Charmaine paused and looked at her. "Who taught you that?" she asked. Nyla gave a shy shrug. "My grandmother. I just cook from memory." Charmaine nodded slowly. "Well, memory tastes real good." Word spread. Customers started asking, "Who made this?" They asked for Nyla's greens, Nyla's baked chicken, Nyla's peach cobbler, and for the first time, people were speaking her name with admiration, not blame. At night, after rocking Imani to sleep, Nyla studied business online, budgeting, food costs, branding, marketing. She was tired, so tired, but this was a different kind of tired. This tired had purpose. Then one afternoon at a community fundraiser, Nyla met Miles Carter. Miles was a quiet, steady black man in his early 30s, a high school guidance counselor with patient eyes and a calm spirit. He was the kind of man who listened fully before speaking. He first noticed Nyla when she was balancing a food tray with one hand and holding Imani on her hip with the other. "Need help?" he asked. Nyla almost said no out of habit, but something in his voice felt safe. Miles became a friend first, then a steady presence, then something deeper. He never rushed her, never pressured her, and he never treated Imani like someone else's child. He showed up. That was his language. With time, savings, and Charmaine's support, Nyla finally took the biggest step of all. She opened her own small restaurant. She called it Grace and Grit Kitchen because grace kept her alive and grit rebuilt her life. The opening day was modest. A few balloons, a handmade sign, a nervous smile on Nyla's face, but by closing time the line was out the door. And as Nyla stood in her own kitchen, flour on her apron, Imani laughing in Aunt Denise's arms, and Miles smiling from across the room, she realized something powerful. The same woman they called broken had become a mother, a business owner, a woman rebuilding from the ashes, and the best part, she did it without begging the people who broke her. 25 years after Nyla was thrown out of the Grant house, the truth had finished growing. Not just the truth about Terence, not just the truth about Yvonne, but the truth about what happens when pride destroys a home. Nyla was no longer the broken woman standing on a porch with one suitcase. She was older now, wiser, steady. The softness was still in her voice, but now there was strength under it. The kind of strength pain cannot kill. Grace and Grit Kitchen had become more than a restaurant. It had become a brand, a respected business, a story people told with admiration. Miles had stayed exactly who he was from the beginning, faithful, patient, present. He married Nyla. He helped raise Imani. And later, he and Nyla had a son together, Jordan Carter, a bright, funny boy who grew into a confident young man under a roof filled with peace instead of blame. But the real miracle stood at the center of it all. Imani, the little girl they once rejected before she was even born, had grown into Dr. Imani Grant Carter, brilliant, compassionate, disciplined, a young black woman with calm authority and a heart big enough to care for people who were hurting. Everything Yvonne said Nyla could never produce stood alive in that woman. Meanwhile, Terence's life had narrowed into something small and lonely. He never built the family he bragged about. He moved from one failed relationship to another. Some women left after the arguments, some left after the medical truth surfaced, some left as soon as they realized he still blamed others for what he had ruined himself. Yvonne had died years earlier, weaker and quieter than the woman she used to be. And when she died, she left behind no peace, only regret. Terence was now a gray-haired man with slower steps, tired eyes, and a silence that followed him everywhere. Then one afternoon, Terence went to the city hospital for a follow-up appointment. He checked in. He sat down. He waited, and then a nurse called his name. "Mr. Grant?" Terence stood up slowly and followed the voice down the hall. When he stepped into the consultation room, he saw her, a young doctor in a clean white coat, reviewing his file with calm focus. She looked up, and Terence froze, because he knew that face, he knew those eyes, he knew the shape of her mouth, he knew the softness in her expression. Nyla. Nyla was in that face, not fully, but enough. The doctor offered a professional smile. "Hello, sir. I'm Dr. Imani Grant Carter. Please have a seat." Grant. The name hit him first, then Carter. Terence's knees nearly buckled. His only child, the only child he would ever have, sitting right in front of him, alive, thriving, successful, and she did not know him. "Sir?" Imani asked gently. "Are you okay?" Terence opened his mouth, but no words came. His throat locked, his eyes filled. Because what could he say? "I threw your mother out while you were still inside her. I let my family curse her. I chose pride over love. I was supposed to be your father." He sat down slowly, hands trembling. Imani glanced at him with concern, then reached for a glass of water. "Take your time," she said kindly. Kindly. That almost broke him more than anything else, because even without knowing who he was, she showed him more compassion than he had ever shown her mother. After the appointment, Terence walked out into the hospital corridor like a man carrying a mountain, and there, at the far end, he saw one more thing. Nyla. She was standing beside Miles, who had come to pick Imani up after her shift. Jordan was with them too, laughing about something on his phone. A whole family, a whole life, a whole legacy. Terence stopped walking. Nyla looked at him from a distance, not with hatred, not with longing, just with peace. And that was the final punishment. because Terence finally understood what he had lost. Not just a wife, not just a marriage, an entire future. He had thrown away loyalty, he had thrown away grace, he had thrown away the only child who carried his blood. And that child was raised by a better man. That is the moral, and it lands like thunder. When pride makes you blame the innocent, you bury your own blessings. When cruelty guides your choices, regret becomes your inheritance. And when you reject good people because of lies, life will make you watch from a distance, as the future you threw away flourishes without you. Terence lived, but he lived with empty hands. And that is the kind of story that stays in your mind long after it ends. What happened to Nyla was painful to watch, because it was built on something so common and so dangerous, people making cruel judgments before they know the truth. She was blamed, mocked, and pushed aside by the very people who should have shown her care. And by the time the truth finally came out, too much had already been broken. That is what makes this story so heavy. Not just the betrayal, but the fact that it all could have been avoided if even one person had chosen honesty over pride. The lesson here is clear. When people refuse to face the truth, they often create damage that cannot be reversed. A careless word can do harm. A proud decision can change the direction of an entire life. And when someone keeps choosing ego over compassion, they may not feel the cost right away, but one day they will. This story is a reminder that not every loss happens in a single moment. Some losses unfold slowly, over years, until a person finally sees what they threw away. What stands out most to me is that Nyla never wasted her life trying to prove herself to people who had already decided to misunderstand her. She stepped away from the noise, protected what mattered, and built a better life in peace. That is what makes her journey so satisfying to watch. She did not need to shout. She did not need revenge. Life revealed the truth on its own, and in the end, that truth spoke louder than anything else. Now I want to hear from you. Which character left the biggest impression on you, and why? Was it Nyla for the way she rebuilt her life? Was it Monique for showing up when it mattered most? Was it Miles for the calm and steady love he brought? Or did another character stand out to you for a completely different reason? Tell me in the comments. I always enjoy seeing which part of the story connected with you the most. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who would connect with it, and subscribe for more stories like this. This is Mr. Hope, and I'll see you in the next story.